Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 309, Breaking the Sound Barrier. I woke one morning with the title of this piece bouncing around in my thoughts, and it just wouldn't leave me alone. I've learned over time that when that happens, I need to put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard to unpack what is emerging. At times like these, when I have no idea why a phrase or idea is so persistent, I need to give it time to percolate, preferably uninterrupted time. As I began to mull, I was initially a little confused, as I associate the term sound barrier with something like Concorde travelling faster than the speed of sound and creating a sonic boom. Tangential, I know, but there have been many times when I've been in the presence of people whose voices overwhelm me with both volume and pace. What happens is that the impact builds, and after a while, if it's relentless, I experience my own internal sonic boom. That's when I have to hightail it out of their presence. My learning from this has been not to wait until that sonic boom moment, but to create space between us much earlier on. And that's about managing my own exits. In order to do that effectively, so I'm looking after my needs but not creating a ruckus, I found I first need to pay attention to the impact the volume and pace is having on my nervous system. Once I notice the impact is upsetting me in some way, and yes, I'm quite happy to own that, I use one of my tried and tested exit strategies. I have a great little collection of them, and there is always something that fits. Now, that in itself was an interesting enough realisation, but this topic that's been occupying a fair bit of my thinking wasn't that. It felt like it was something much closer to my heart and my very way of being. So my first aha was that the essence of the title is slightly different to the one bouncing around my head. It's not breaking the sound barrier. It's actually breaking my sound barrier. And just to reassure any of you who have come out in a cold sweat, this isn't about being uncharacteristically loud or fast, and certainly not just for the sake of it. Being an introvert myself, you know I would never advocate for the noisy way anyway. I mean, can you imagine? This is about me identifying the barriers to using my voice effectively so that I can dismantle, overcome, or at a push, avoid them. And of course, by extension, this is my invitation to you to do the same so you can use your voice effectively too. None of this happens by accident. It happens by application. So many of the introverts I work with share how they find themselves silenced by people, culture, and situations. And on top of that, or because of it, they silence themselves for a whole host of reasons. Whichever it is, it tends to either reinforce self-limiting beliefs, which then becomes an almost impenetrable narrative, or it activates our sense that we need to be more like extroverts. And you know what I think about that. Neither of these perspectives is helpful. There's a reason that I called my podcast The Flourishing Introvert Talks, with the subtitle of Dispelling the Myth that we have nothing to say for ourselves. And this episode has its roots in that myth, and on this occasion, how we can be complicit in perpetuating that myth. How? By not using our voice often enough, which means we're probably believing the biased narrative. Whatever your reason for your barrier to using your voice, it need not be a fixed thing. If there are people and situations that make it a challenge for you to speak out and be heard, they can be managed assertively. I should know. I've just done that. You see, at a recent networking event that I attended, my first interaction was with a very forceful person who, in response to me sharing what I do, said, "I'm an introvert, but I learned I needed to upgrade and be more extraverted." I'm sorry, what? I mean, what the actual? In that moment, I had the option to leave it, self-silence and walk away, but that's not who I am, nor is it the way to highlight the bias. So in my quietly gutsy way, I asked what they meant by upgrade and whether they believed that extroverts were better than introverts. As you can imagine, a bit of an uncomfortable conversation ensued, but one that I was prepared to stay in. After all, here was a self-confessed introvert who was potentially colluding with the bias, lock, stock, and two smoking barrels. I couldn't simply walk away. I mean, what kind of authority would I be if I stayed quiet and ignored or turned away from such a classic expression of the bias, the very bias I'm on a mission to shift? I couldn't walk away because I have a responsibility to speak out. This incident helped me to gain clarity on something around my sound barrier, and it's this. When I'm called to or have the opportunity to use my voice for good, I now see it as my responsibility. I have a responsibility not to correct or judge, but to stay curious and in the conversation so that I understand people and their perspectives better. If, however, I realise that I've got into the habit of self-silencing based on limiting and self-limiting beliefs, they too can be unpacked so I can find my true voice. It's exactly the reason that some people come to my Flip Your Limiting Beliefs course to address. Finding your true voice is just the first step, though, because using it is altogether another level. Is it easy? Maybe not. Although it is easier once you have a real understanding of what you want to be heard for. Is it necessary? Absolutely. I hear regularly from my clients about how they don't agree with how they or someone they know is being treated, but freeze or panic at the thought of saying something. Just look at what's going on in the world right now at both a global and local level. If people don't feel empowered and confident enough to use their voices, the bullies and the tyrants win. And let's be clear, these bullies, tyrants, and psychopathic types may be in government, in organisational leadership roles, or in our families. It's time we were able to break our own sound barrier and in our clear, calm way, speak up for what's right. And let's face it, isn't that how we'd prefer everyone to speak? Impassioned, yes, but measured rather than ranty, and delivered with a calmness that introverts do so well. Using our voice is so important for many reasons, some of them personal and some of them professional. I want to start with one that's really important and that might surprise you. It certainly surprised me. Ready? When we use our voice, especially intentionally, we are stimulating the vagus nerve. This has the ability to slow the heart rate and lower stress levels. Now, I find that fascinating as the story we tell ourselves, granted, typically based on experience, is that speaking in public is really nerve-wracking. Now, there's a belief that we can work on and flip. How and where would you use your voice more if you believed that it had those positive benefits? The second benefit, of course, is in order to uphold or defend our boundaries. This needs to be a daily conscious practice because once we're known for being a pushover, we've opened the floodgates. I'll share Tony Gaskin's quote yet again. You teach people how to treat you by what you stop, what you allow, and what you reinforce. Enough said, I think, except to ask, which boundary do you need to uphold better? The next is that effective communication helps to prevent misunderstandings, assumptions, and potential conflict. Having delivered effective communication skills courses for thousands of clients around the globe over the last 30 or so years, I can't stress enough how vital it is to master our verbal communications. So, what misunderstandings might be avoided if you were able to speak out more? The next one I found is so prevalent in corporate environments where the managers and leaders don't grasp the nature of inclusivity. The Babel effect, where the person who speaks the most or the loudest is considered to have the best leadership capability, negatively impacts so many of we introverts. We all know that misplaced confidence like this fails so many of us, which is why it's one of the things I explore in my coaching, supervision, and consulting work. Finally, in order to flourish and live a truly fulfilled life, we need to be able to advocate for ourselves, which means stepping into our power and speaking out. This isn't about thinking you have to be in the limelight, something that has many of us feel very uncomfortable and can drive us into retreat. This is about believing in your right to be heard and choosing to take the opportunities to use your voice. So my final question is, to what extent do you believe you have the right to be heard? So there you have it. A number of reasons, some surprising and some probably predictable, as to why using your voice as an introvert is important. The reality is we probably need to hear those reasons more often than we think before we actually take action. As I did my own work, unpacking this phrase that was rumbling around my conscious mind, I was able to identify a few of my own sound barriers that pop back up from time to time. One barrier is linked to the fact that I don't like unnecessary conflict. There was a moment during my networking experience when I did a quick risk analysis about how likely this was to result in conflict. The likelihood was actually pretty high, but it mattered enough for me to not self-silence. Another barrier I face from time to time can be a bit of imposter syndrome. Who am I to speak about this? Actually, paraphrasing Marianne Williamson, who am I not to speak about it? I do believe that I have a right to be heard, and that usually bounces the imposter right out of town. Probably the trickiest one that I've had to navigate quite regularly is not being ready to speak because I'm still processing. Fortunately, I now have techniques that I use to communicate my need for time without losing credibility. So, I wonder what you'll find when you look for your barriers. More importantly, I wonder what you'll choose to do about them. Ignore them at your peril, though, because this is a time for action. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us, and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.